As we approach the middle of September, many areas across the Central Plains are beginning the harvest season. Will heavy rains and storms impact those harvest plans? And how long will this peak last across the eastern half of the United States? We have all the details and more next at the Weather Farm. As we begin our Monday morning, we are watching some storms across parts of North Dakota that are making their way to the north and to the east. They will make their way up towards Manitoba during the afternoon on Monday. But elsewhere across the country, we're relatively quiet. We do have an area of low pressure here off the coast of North Carolina that is bringing some scattered storms and showers to the coastal areas. Those will continue to persist throughout the next 24 to 48 hours. But from coast to coast, we are under the influence of high pressure. But we're watching this area of low pressure as it continues to move off to the northeast. It did spawn some showers and some strong storms on our Sunday. We're going to watch that for our Canadian province as we go into Monday afternoon. And as we go into Tuesday, that low pressure has made its way into northern Manitoba up to Hudson Bay. We're continuing to watch that area of low pressure off the coast. It is just very stationary, so it's going to continue to bring rounds of showers through the Virginia and North Carolina as we begin our Tuesday morning. And out of the Pacific to the south and west of the Baja California, we are watching what is now Tropical Storm Mario. It has winds at about 40 miles per hour. It's expected to continue to move off to the northwest very slowly, but is expected to dissipate and not pose any threat to any land masses or to the southwestern part of the United States. When we look at the threat of severe weather for our Monday, we are watching a wide area, basically from the Tennessee Valley up through Missouri and Iowa, back through the northern plains into Montana and Wyoming. This isn't severe weather that we're expecting. We're expecting mainly heavy rains and an occasional strong thunderstorm or two across most of this area. And as we make our way into Tuesday, though, that's when things could get a little bit more interesting, as we now have an area of marginal risk from northwestern Kansas into southeastern and south central Nebraska. I do expect that by the time we get to Tuesday afternoon that this area of concern will grow into a slight risk for severe weather, with the threat of thunderstorms, hail, and an isolated tornado cannot be ruled out across this area on Tuesday afternoon. It is going to be the focus area as we get toward the middle of the week for severe weather up and down the Central Plains. So let's put everything into motion. As we begin our Monday, as I mentioned, we have that area of low pressure continuing to skirt the Carolina coast. We watch that low make its way up into Manitoba, and out in the Pacific we watch Tropical Storm Mario. But here we go. On Tuesday afternoon, we watch those storms start to fire across Nebraska and Kansas. They die down from the heating of the day, but Wednesday afternoon, they fire right back up. We even have some strong storms up in the Dakotas as we make our way into our Thursday afternoon. Oklahoma, you're starting to get in on the action. And really, it's this whole plains corridor from Texas up through the Dakotas that we're going to be watching this week for the threat of heavy rain, strong storms, and severe weather. We can see this here on our Wednesday as we see those storms continuing to persist across parts of Nebraska and Kansas. And as we go into our Thursday, those storms now make their way up towards North Dakota for our early Thursday morning. Florida, you do have some scattered showers in the southern part of the state that we're continuing to watch, and those will provide locally heavy amounts of rainfall over the next 48 to 72 hours. In fact, as I mentioned, here across southern Florida, we could see areas reaching 2 to 4, possibly 5 inches of rain, basically from points Orlando down towards Miami. You're in the bullseye area. With those repeated storms training over the same areas from the Dakotas down through Oklahoma throughout most of this work week, we're going to see a widespread area of 2 to 4 inches of rain likely across this area, making its way up towards Manitoba and then across Hudson Bay. Elsewhere across the United States, though, we are really strapped for moisture, with most areas through the southeast, through parts of Texas, into the Four Corners region and the Pacific Northwest, and look through the Ohio Valley into the northeast. Basically, no amount of rain for the next 7 days. This is good news if you're farmers and you need to get those crops harvested, but across the Central Plains, harvesting is going to be put on hold because of the wet conditions that we are expecting for the next 5 days. When we look at the total amount of rainfall, we could see by the time we get to our Saturday morning, Nebraska, you are in the bullseye, with most areas of central Nebraska receiving anywhere from 1 to 3 inches of rain. As we go down through central Kansas, we could have an isolated 4 to 5 inch amount, as well as we make our way into Oklahoma and into northwestern Arkansas. So definitely watch the weather, and we may have some delays in the harvest season across the Central Plains. As we look at the northern plains, we look at places like North Dakota, where you're going to see heavy amounts of rain, 2 to 4 inches across parts of west central North Dakota, down through South Dakota, and as we mentioned, down through Nebraska. Even western Iowa, you're going to get in on this heavy amount of rain, with amounts up to 1 to 2 inches of rain, as well as in southwestern Minnesota. Well, what's causing all this? We have a strong area of high pressure that's anchored across the eastern half of the United States. We have southwesterly winds with that low that is coming out of the Rockies up into the Canadian provinces. This is fueling southwesterly winds that's going to provide the opportunity for strong storms and repeated strong storms. We do have a cutoff trough that is going to continue to make its way into the Central Plains by the time we get to Wednesday and Thursday. This is going to be the focus mechanism for those strong storms and severe weather as we get into the second half of the work week. Out across the Northeast, we're watching a trough that's going to dig in down from Quebec into places like Maine and into Nova Scotia. That's going to keep that area with below normal temperatures as we enter next weekend. And speaking of those warmer temperatures, we are going to watch temperatures continue to be very warm, 80s and 90s across most of the Central Plains into the Ohio Valley, even towards Columbus, Ohio. You could be in the upper 80s for your Monday. The Northeast is going to be near seasonal temperatures in the 70s, as well across the Rockies. We have temperatures here in the 50s and 60s. The deserts in the Southwest, you're staying around those triple digits for your Monday. As we make our way into Tuesday, that warmth is really beginning to spread into parts of western Ontario where we can see high temperatures in the middle 80s. Where you have those storms firing across Nebraska into the Dakotas, that will help keep your temperatures down just a little bit with temperatures here in the 70s and 80s. Out west, we are warming back up, especially through the interior of California, where we see highs in the upper 90s as far north as San Francisco. When we make our way into our Wednesday, that warmth continues here. Now we're seeing triple digits. Phoenix, you're at 102. We're seeing 90s across the southeast. They're now making their way into Illinois. Even parts of southern Michigan, you could be flirting with 90 degrees for your Wednesday. And as we go into Thursday, with those repeated rain showers across the plains areas, that's going to help keep those temperatures down in the 70s and 80s for most of this week. With the real warmth being kept down across the South Atlantic, you're going to be near 90. But look out in the interior. We're still baked here in the triple digits for the interior of California. And that's going to continue as we go towards this upcoming weekend. We do see a little bit of relief as those showers make their way through the Central Plains into western Missouri and Iowa. Here temperatures in the 70s and 80s, but we are warming back up across parts of Idaho and Washington State. Temperatures there retreating into the 90s. But as we saw, we're going to have that trough digging across the far northeastern part of the United States. Their temperatures will be kept in the 50s and 60s to begin our weekend. And across parts of Quebec, you could be in the mid-40s for your afternoon highs. Florida, with that constant threat of showers and storms for most of this week, your temperatures are going to be in the mid to upper 80s most days. As we look at our 8 to 14 day outlook, most of the United States from Utah, Idaho, and all the way to the East Coast has a higher than normal chance of seeing above normal temperatures as we get into the latter half of September into early October. Temperatures here are expected to be well above normal. We do have a tiny sliver here through most of Nevada, Washington State, and Eastern Oregon of near normal temperatures. But in terms of precipitation, most of that is going to stay west of the Mississippi River, especially in the Pacific Northwest, where we could see above normal precipitation to close out the month of September. So let's jump down to our tropics. We've talked about what's going on in the Pacific with Storm Mario, but we do have an area that the National Hurricane Center is monitoring in the eastern Atlantic. It is an area of disorganized showers at this point. As it continues to move to the west and northwest, it is moving into some unfavorable conditions, so we don't expect tropical storm development over the next 24 to 48 hours. However, as it gets more into the central Atlantic and it gets to the north and east of the Leeward Islands, here's Bermuda, making that path toward Bermuda. We do expect that by the second half of this upcoming week, we could see the development of a tropical system here in the central Atlantic. But we do believe that it won't pose any threat to land at this time, as we expect that trough that is going to dig into the northeast from Quebec is going to help steer any possible development back out to sea as it approaches Bermuda. Still a lot to talk about and to monitor over the next 7 days. As we saw a couple weeks ago, we had a system that had a 90% chance of development quickly fizzle out as it made its way into the central Atlantic. And with this area encountering some unfavorable conditions over the next 24 hours, we're going to closely monitor this. But right now, it has about a 70% chance of development into a tropical system. Well, that finishes us for our forecast here on your Monday. We hope you have enjoyed this forecast. We hope you have a wonderful day. Go ahead and drop down in the comments where you're watching this video from. What are some things that you would like to see in an upcoming video for us to talk about? What did you think about our segment on Alaskan weather? We hope to do more segments like that based upon the feedback that we have from viewers like you. Again, have a great day, and we will see you again real soon.